Hi, hello everyone. This is Alessandro from the VS Code team, and today I'm here to talk to you about the latest innovations that we brought to Visual Studio Code over the last few months to make sure that you can work with VS Code anywhere, anytime, and on any device. In particular, today we'll talk about two things. The first one is Visual Studio Code for the web, which we released in October in preview, and allows you to use VS Code in any browser without any setup. And the second thing is GitHub Codespaces, which is a complete cloud-powered development environment that is backed by VS Code and running in a cloud environment managed by GitHub. All of these innovations that we released over the last few months allow you to use VS Code and to be productive no matter where you are and what device you're on. For example, you could even use them on a tablet like this iPad that is sitting next to me. Let's get started by talking about Visual Studio Code for the web. To use VS Code for the web, the first thing you need to do is just to open a web browser. VS Code for the web works with any modern web browser, also on tablets, on Chromebooks, and other low-power devices. And you just need to go to vscode.dev, vscode.dev. This opens the familiar Visual Studio Code interface that you might be well used to, except this is running entirely in the browser, and it is completely self-contained within the browser sandbox. VS Code for the web doesn't have all the features of the traditional VS Code. However, it does have support for editing files on the local disk, including the files that are stored on your laptop, as well as repositories from GitHub and Azure repos. In the first part of this demo, I'm going to show how you can open a folder from your local file system and make changes using VS Code for the web. So let's click on Open Folder, and I'm going to select my demo folder, which contains a TypeScript project. In here, you can see that the list of files in my folder are appearing here, and I can open files and browse them, and I get syntax highlighting, everything is colored, and also hovering when I move my mouse over the items. This is great also for editing markdowns, and you can also click on the button to see the preview and see what the markdown looks like rendered, exactly like Visual Studio Code would. With VS Code for the web, you can also make changes to the source code. For example, this is a TypeScript file, and you see I get syntax highlighting, I get hover, and I also get some limited intelligence. For example, if I try typing array dot, you can see the autocomplete that suggests what else to type. VS Code for the web is not a complete editor with all the features of VS Code. However, there's a few, including support for search, like I can search for const, and I will see all the results in every single file contained in this folder. You have the ability to make changes, save files, and you have the ability to use some of the extensions. Not every extension works in VS Code for the web, but the number is increasing. Notably, you can use the GitHub extension, LiveShare, Gitspad, and a bunch more that are made by Microsoft and by the community. VS Code for the web is great to make small code changes and changes that don't necessarily require compiling. In fact, VS Code for the web has a limitation that because there's no compute behind this, as I mentioned earlier, everything is running entirely within the sandbox of your web browser. Certain things are not available. You cannot use all extensions. And also you cannot, sorry about that, you cannot use the terminal. If you try to open that, it tells you that the terminal is not available in the web editor, and this is because there is no actual shell. This is not running on an operating system. It's not running on any compute. Also, because of that, you cannot run and debug code. We are looking at some experiences to debug and run specific kind of application, specific kind of code. For example, there is a Go Playground extension that allows you to, that I created, by the way, that allows you to run Go files using an external service, the Go Playground. But these are more limited scenarios. For all those other situations, we can leverage Codespaces, and we'll see a demo about that in a moment. One of the things that I wanted to talk about is how Visual Studio Code and GitHub Codespaces can run on any device, and that means also on tablets. So for the next part of this demo, I'm actually going to switch to my iPad, and I'm going to do the rest of the demo from there. So here I'm working on my iPad. I am working on this application that has been live, and I got a text from a colleague that the app is broken. In fact, as you can see, all the images are missing. And this is a big problem. This is a live application, and users are being impacted right now. However, I'm currently not at home. I am traveling, and my only device that I have with me right now is my iPad. So what am I going to do? Well, turns out with VS Code for the web and GitHub Codespaces, thankfully, there's actually a lot that I can do directly from my iPad using a web browser. So the source code for this application is stored on GitHub in a repository that is here. And I think I know what the problem is. In fact, to be honest, it's my fault. I messed up. But I can use VS Code for the web to make this change and fix it right away. So I'm going to go here and change the URL to add vscode.dev before the URL of the repository. And this launches Visual Studio Code in the browser, and it shows my files that are fetched directly from GitHub. And you can see here that vscode.dev is connecting to GitHub and fetches the file there, and also shows the list. I actually need to refresh with the latest changes. Okay, so I know what the problem is. In this, this is the original one. Sorry about that. So in this file, which is the template, the path here is missing an S. So I'm just going to add it here and save. This actually gets saved automatically. And then when I go to my source control, just like I would in regular Visual Studio Code, I can see the change here that has been made. I want to commit this, but I don't want to make the commit directly to main. So I'm going to click here to create a new branch, just like I would do on any Visual Studio Code installation. And I'm going to create a new branch and call it Fix Images. Then VS Code asks me if I want to switch to a new branch, maintaining all of the code changes, and I'm going to say yes. This reloads the window, and you can see that I am in the new branch that I created, and the change that I made is here, and it's just ready to be saved. So I'm gonna commit this by saying fixed image path and commit. And because I'm working with a GitHub remote, the commit is already made and synchronized to GitHub. So if I go to the repository, you can see that the branch has already been pushed to GitHub, and it's already here. Now, the next step, of course, is to make a pull request so someone can review that. So I am going to use VS Code again and use the GitHub issues and pull request extensions to do that. I'm going to go here and create a new pull request. I want to merge the changes from fixed images into main. Perfect. And I'm just going to add the title is already there. I'm going to add a description, fixes live site incident. Perfect. Create. And this creates a pull request directly with GitHub. And it's here, so I can review it, and I can also open it with the GitHub UI to be able to see that the pull request is here. So this is perfect. However, I don't want to merge this pull request just yet. I already messed up the live site once, so I want to be sure that this is actually working. So how can I test my code and make sure that it is working when I'm working on an iPad that doesn't have any IDE, doesn't have a terminal, doesn't have anything that I can use to test the code? Well, for that, I can use Codespaces. So in any GitHub repository, you can click on the code button, and if you have Codespaces enabled, you can launch Codespaces directly from there, or click on New Codespaces. In this case, I am going to also do that inside a pull request. And this will launch Codespace, which is Visual Studio Code running within a web browser. But unlike Visual Studio Code for the web, this one does have a backing compute. So you will see that when the Codespace launches, for example, I get access to a terminal. I get access to every single extension that is supported by VS Code, and I have the ability to build, run, and debug my code. So this should be running in just a second. The files are showing up, and here's my terminal. So because this application is a Node.js application, the first thing I need to do is to run npm install just to make sure that everything is working properly. And this will install all the dependencies, and this is done. And then from here, what I'm going to do is I am going to check out the branch with the fixes. Perfect. And you can see that on the GitHub extensions, I can also see the details of the pull request and see the changes that are here. So what I'm going to do before I merge this, I want to confirm that everything is working. So I'm going to start this application, which is a JavaScript application. So I'm going to do node index.js. And this will launch the application. Now, the problem is that I'm working in a cloud environment, so I can't just open a browser and say localhost and see my application running. The good thing is that on Codespaces, all the ports are forwarded to my machine, so I can access them by clicking on ports. And I see here that there is something running on port 3000. It's the node index.js that's a process that I launch. And there is a local address, so I can just copy this or click on that button to open it. This should load in 1 second. And I see my application and I see that, yes, the images are actually working this time. I fixed them and this is all good. So I'm going to go back to my pull request and I feel comfortable merging it now. Perfect. And so this is merging the pull request, and this is triggering the GitHub action that deploys the application to my Azure web app. While this is running, it will just take a minute or two. I wanted to show that Codespaces is the full experience of Visual Studio Code. You can access that through a web browser that works on any modern browser, including iPads and tablets. You can also connect to a Codespace using a desktop Visual Studio Code application if you are working on a machine that does have VS Code installed. Inside Codespace, you have all the features of VS Code, all the extensions, also the ability to run and debug by creating a debug file. All the extensions work and the full Visual Studio Code experience is available. So let's go back and let's wait for my action to be completed and my application to be deployed. And that's it. The application has been deployed. So if I click on the URL to my live site, you see that it's fixed and everything is back and working and the images are shown. And so we fixed this and we did this completely from a tablet that I could have been anywhere and I could have done this at any time with just my tablet device. So let me switch back to my laptop. And this concludes our demo. Today, I showed you how to use Visual Studio Code anywhere, at any time, and on any device, including on my tablet. We used two different things that were announced over the last few months. The first one was Visual Studio Code for the web, which you can access at vscode.dev using a web browser, and you can edit files on your local machine or files that are stored on GitHub and Azure repos source control. Next, we moved into GitHub Codespaces, which is a complete cloud-powered development environment backed by cloud resources that are managed by GitHub, and that you can work on using Visual Studio Code in the browser and Visual Studio Code as a desktop app. To learn more about the GitHub Codespaces and how to get started, you can visit aak.ms/codespaces.